very well, that the flow state is that thing also. It is by definition disrupted by interruption, right? And if you are constantly interrupting yourself, text messages, got to check Instagram to see if people are responding to the thing I posted 5 minutes ago, you are not letting yourself sink into the flow state. You're not going to be able to be deeply.
You know what I find? I like to... Friends, Bill DeResowitz is back, and we're here to talk about another book. He's written another thought-provocative book called The End of Solitude. If you missed my interview with Bill on Excellent Sheep, please go back. You'll see it on our YouTube channel. It was fantastic, and I'm excited to hear you talk about The End of Solitude. So Bill, walk us through your thought process, how it evolved that made you think, I got to write this. What was going on there in your mind?
Well, The End of Solitude is a collection of essays.
Yeah.
Sort of my favorite essays, my sort of top hits over many years of writing. It takes its title from one essay in particular that actually grew out of the essay that spawned Excellent Sheep.
Oh,
So
I know that.
I wrote this essay called The Disadvantages of an Elite Education. And just in passing, I mentioned something about how my students didn't really understand the value of solitude anymore. This was in 2008. This was when everyone my age was joining Facebook. Everyone younger had just joined. I mean, the thing was just a few years old. It was really the beginning of social media and ultimately the whole kind of internet life that we've been living ever since. And a smart editor at a place that I was writing for did what smart editors do and wrote to me and said, hey, you said that thing about solitude. Could you write an essay about that? Why is solitude important? What's going on? So I did. It was really a reflection, came out in 2009. It was a reflection on my experience of being on Facebook, what I thought it was doing to our social life, what I thought it was doing to our inner life, what I thought it was doing to our friendships. And I framed it as a loss of a thing that I'm calling solitude, by which I mean, there are three different things that we have to distinguish. There's aloneness, which is just the physical state, the objective state of being by yourself. You can look at someone and say whether they're alone or not. But there are two ways to feel about it. And the more common one is loneliness. Loneliness is this negative state of being alone. It's a kind of emptiness. It's a kind of grief. You want to get away from it. Solitude, which is a word that I'm giving to something that could be described in other ways, is the positive experience. It's a full experience. It's a fertile experience. It's when you are alone with yourself in a way that allows you to hear yourself, or that just allows you to concentrate on a book, on, manual work. You're building a table, you're fixing an electrical panel, whatever it is, you're cooking a meal. And as everyone, knows 100 times better now than they did in 2009, the internet is making that impossible. The internet has spelled the end of solitude. And I try to spell out in that essay why I think that's significant, what I think we're losing. And it's connected to Excellent Sheep because part of what we're losing is an ability to kind of tune into ourselves and say, what do I want? Not what does the internet want? What does the algorithm want me to do? I mean, in 2009, I would have said, what do my friends on Facebook want? But now it's really the algorithm, right? This sort of fake persona that you present to the world for the sake of getting attention from the world that may not really be who you are, who you want to be, or who you should be at all.
I definitely see the connection. Definitely. What role has smartphones played in this process, in your opinion?
Right. So it's not just, so again, 2008, 2009, it wasn't just that it was Facebook, not Twitter, let alone TikTok, but it was also, we were on our laptops. We were opening our laptops and logging onto Facebook and spending too much time scrolling. And then we were closing our laptops and going about our lives. But unbeknownst to us at the time, this new thing had been invented called the smartphone. And now, again, I don't need to explain to anybody that now we're on this all the time. Potentially, and in some cases, in actuality, this can consume every waking moment of your life, including the fact that it's got Jonathan Haidt talks about this, that the real hinge point was not even the smartphone, but the smartphone with the front-facing camera, right? So everything I said now 17 years ago, I think is true 10 times over. About,
I'll tell you a story, and this is not going to surprise you.
Yeah.
So I've got two daughters, 30 and 27. They're both in education, but this is my 27-year-old I'm talking about now. So she was a high-level basketball player, played very high level, and a lot of my job consisted of taking her and her AAU friends all over the country to compete. And she started doing this in 6th and 7th grade. So in 7th grade, I can't remember where it was I remember we were a long way. I'm in Atlanta, is a long ways away from that. I don't know if it was New Orleans, if it was Columbus, if it was Raleigh. Like, we used to go all these places. But, I'm sitting at a restaurant because sometimes I'd be the chaperone and guarantee that, take the trips. Sitting at a restaurant with my daughter, Joy, and three of her friends. And, I was thinking, sort of agreeing, did you take these trips? Your whole weekend's gone, right? Like, it's gone, but you do it because you love your daughter. But I was also thinking, one of the benefits of this is it's kind of nice to sort of get to know her peers too. So you're sitting at a restaurant and everybody is just looking at their phone the whole time until the food comes. They're
Yeah.
just everybody. And this is not atypical. Now, this is when she was in seventh grade. And so this would have been
Wow.
2011. This is
Yeah.
2011.
Yeah.
So in 2011,
Yeah.
this culture was
Yeah.
pervasive.
It was just coming
And that
in.
was
Yeah.
middle school. That's middle
Yeah.
school.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. Listen, I
Yeah.
mean, we all understand this now, and I think we don't wanna sound like grumpy old men who
Sure.
remember back in the day. But look, but the other, I mean, in a way that I don't know we would have said 5 years ago, people are really getting sick of this. I mean, I think people of all ages are getting sick of this. We hear about kids who are, trying to, gather their friends into groups to limit their screen time and have more sort of face-to-face social interaction. Schools, parents who want to get the cell phones out of their kids' lives or delay as long as possible. Because I think we all understand what this is doing to us. In the same way that I say this to kids and parents about college choice, the excellent sheep thing, you can make choices for yourself. It's not easy. You have to swim against the tide. I understand that. It's easier if you have friends who are doing it too, whether it's the college thing or the smartphone thing. And and it's easier the more you do it, right? You sort of build that muscle. But I think what really makes it easy is trying it, putting your smartphone down for a little while and realizing how good it makes you feel. Because it does, right? I mean, people will say this. It's kind of like taking a vice off of your head, you know? And the more you experience that good feeling, I think the easier it becomes. You want to have it again. So you build it into your life.
Is this almost in some ways a 50-year trend that's been accelerated? Because, I can hear someone saying, that's what TV did. TV on all the time. Like, before TV, there was a lot more solitude, maybe going back to the radio days, and then TV on the time on all the time at all times, partly, interferes with solitude. Then we just go from that to social media, to phones, and then TikTok. And I remember I wrote a book in 2016 called 171 Answers to Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And I literally had a quote in there. One of the reasons why I set up the way I did with these 171 short chapters, because I'd done another project before, a 10-hour video series, and people would say, I don't have time for 10 hours to look at something. And I remember a quote that talked about literally a scientific study about how our attention span has shortened, like scientifically documented with all the stimulus coming at us. And I wish I could remember the quote, but I talked about it in there, how it's been shortened by several seconds. And which kind of makes sense, right? If you have stimuli coming at you at all times.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, in that original essay, The End of Solitude, I talk about television and the role that television played in my life. Growing up in the 70s, I watched hours of television a day. It was not good. It really made it hard for me to sort of cultivated this sort of knack for boredom. Like, I need stimulation, because the more you can stimulate yourself by turning on the television, the less you can tolerate not being stimulated. So in some ways, I think it was an earlier version of that. And I can hear some people saying like, oh, everyone's always complained about new technologies. Well, you know what? It doesn't mean that some of those complaints weren't right. And it doesn't mean that some of the complaints that we're having about smartphones aren't right. And I do think, I mean, obviously, television is good in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, it wasn't good to have that available. And the smartphone is, I mean, it's another cycle, but it's worse. It's a worse cycle. The television was in the basement. I didn't carry it around. It wasn't in my pocket. The television when I was growing up had 7 channels. It didn't have 7 billion channels. So yeah, we are falling more and more into this. And I think we're losing more now. We're losing our capacity. We're losing, literacy. I would only say again that we're not helpless before this. I can't stand reading all these, writers will talk about, will write essays about how they can't read anymore. It's like, well, just then do something about it. You can do something about it. I've had to rebuild my attention span. I was never like a big social media person, but I'm just as susceptible as anybody else. And I realized 2, 3 years ago that it was getting hard for me to read books, full books. It was getting hard for me to read more than a few minutes at a time. And I'm like, I'm not going to live like this. I'm not going to become this person. And again, it helped by I sort of tuned in to what this experience really was. You know, you spend some amount of time scrolling and it just feels like the time has gone down the drain. Like, what did I just do? And if you can become self-aware and you can modify your own behavior, at least this was my experience. So then the next time I'm like, you know what? If I do this, I'm going to feel bad about myself. So interrupt the impulse, pull yourself out of it. I mean, it's like any addiction, right? I've never been addicted to alcohol, but I have friends, in the program in AA. It's like, this is what you need to do.
So, Bill, I think we all have a sense of what are some of the cumulative forces that have caused this attention span to be eroded. My question for you is what are the consequences to the individual by not having the solitude? Because I have a lot of things percolating in my mind that, that could be consequences. How has it had a deleterious impact on each individual on an individual level? What is lost is what I'm asking. What's being lost?
Well, I mean, I think self-awareness is lost. Like I said, being able to sit with yourself and think about what's going on and with you and what you want to do, what you feel about things. I think that so many of the great cultural products that we have available to us, these magnificent works of art from the past, from the present, music, novels, even movies, I say even movies because, they tell me that young people are not and not just young people no longer have the attention span to sit through a full, 90-minute movie. Like, these are great works of art that give us access to other people's experience of the world in the ways that nothing else does, that give us truths about the world, that show us beauties that nothing else does. And we are losing it's like in the same way that you can't play an LP if you don't have a turntable, like we're losing the internal hardware that allows us access to all of this. Like, how sad is that? You can't listen to a piece of, you can't listen to a symphony or a piece of jazz or even a long, 10-minute song because you just can't sit still for it. Like, we're losing all of that too.
It's good timing for us to this interview. Our regular listeners know I like to garden. And I get out there and I garden for hours. Never in a million years thought I would do that. Like my family's like, really? You? But it's funny how you can change over time. But I was out gardening and I was listening to something today and I heard that Bill Gates used to take 10 days to 2 weeks every year to just be alone with his own thoughts. And he said that was the most important 10 days to 2 weeks every year of his whole year, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
No, no, no.
I mean, I think because so much of what we're talking about, right? It's not just that it's constant input, but so much of it is the input is like other people's opinions about the world and other people's opinions about you. If we're talking about social media, so and again, this goes back to excellent sheep and the importance of ha- not having to live your life in order to satisfy the judgments of others. So also just stepping away from that constant stream of judgments. I mean, people talk about this with teenage girls all the time, right? Like this constant toxic feedback on your appearance, on stepping away from that. Just turn it off, Like when we were kids, I mean, I'm guessing teenage girls judged each other when we were kids too. That just like comes with the territory. But you got to go home at the end of the school day and maybe you talked on the phone with one friend or whatever, but you didn't have like the school didn't follow you home. The judgments of the girl group didn't follow you home. So you need to be able to turn that off for the sake of your own mental health.
No, well said, right? And then with social media, it's how many followers do I have and
Yeah,
everything is, you
yeah.
know, people look like they have it all together and we know that they don't. And why is my not life all not all
Yes,
together like
yes,
the such
yes,
and such
all the
person?
things.
Yeah. All of
I mean,
that.
I think all
Yeah.
of this is taking us away from reality. I think there's this
Mhm.
tremendous like reality deficit in our lives where we're not really tuned into what's actual, whether it's these false images on social media, the
Mhm.
filters and all that stuff, or the environment around us that, having our attention on this little screen, like, literally takes us away. I mean, I know it sounds maybe like a cliche, but, like, there's a world outside of your window. There's a world of you garden, I also like to garden. Like, there's a world of nature out there.
Mhm.
And I heard somebody say on another podcast, the psychologist say, that if you are always on your screen, you are not able to, use your intuition and your senses, I think is what he said, your intuition and your senses. to find out what's true, to find out what's true. These are functionalities that evolution has endowed us with to gather information about the world, and we are discarding them in favor of an exclusive reliance on the information that comes through our phones. Not good.
What about loss of creativity too? You know, and that can be creativity in terms of thinking, or it could even be, someone that likes to paint or to write
Yes.
or play
Yes.
music.
I think so, and I think it's for reasons that I think the deepest reason that the constant screen thing disrupts our creativity is that creativity requires you to be able to sink very deeply into your own creative process, right? To get into that flow state. So it's not just that you're constantly seeing other people's images and they're shaping, and you're not able to think more originally as a result and you're being more imitative, but fundamentally, that process that any creative person is going to describe to you, where you need hours to go into your studio or go into your study or pick up your instrument and forget everything that's going on in the world and get into that process, re enter the work that you have in progress or whatever it is, and achieve. I mean, I said that solitude, as I'm calling it, can be described in other ways. And I think focus or concentration is one of those ways. And I think flow, which other people have written about very well, that the flow state is that thing also. It is by definition disrupted by interruption, right? And if you are constantly interrupting yourself, text messages, got to check Instagram to see if people are responding to the thing I posted 5 minutes ago. You are not letting yourself sink into the flow state. You're not going to be able to be deeply.
You know what I find? I like to pray in solitude, and I like to just thank God for certain things. Like I literally say, I'm not doing anything until I thank God for 25 things. And I find I get these bolts of inspiration that like pop into my head that like come out of nowhere that only happen when I'm doing that. And for somebody else it might be something different. Like my youngest daughter, she does a gratitude journal. Every day she does a gratitude journal. And that's like same for her. Like those are some of her times when she has some of her like deepest moments of reflection.
Yeah,
It can be very powerful for getting in tune with who you are, what you value, what you care about, but also just having ideas. Ideas, they
yeah,
just seem
yes,
to,
yes.
I don't know if it's just the noise around doesn't allow the ideas to penetrate your mind. And there's something about quietude that just allows them to penetrate your conscious mind. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and I experienced this myself as well, that those ideas come unexpectedly when I'm just sort of letting my mind kind of wander and make associations. Einstein said the answer comes when you're eating an apple, right?
I like it.
So there's the preparation, the focus, the reading, the linear thinking or sitting down and actually trying to work stuff out. And that's really important. But then the answer comes when you're eating an apple because your mind is able to make connections. But if you're checking your phone while you're eating the apple or listening to a podcast, it's not going to happen.
So let's think about parents out here listening to this who are thinking, this sounds really good. I think maybe my own self, I need to practice this. I certainly want my kids practicing this. Where do they start? What do you recommend? What do you recommend that somebody starts? They say, I haven't been doing any of this, but I'm sold on the benefits and I want to give it a try. What would you tell them to
I
do?
feel like all of my advice falls into the category of easier said than done, but that's true.
Got to start with something.
Turn off the phone. This is
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Turn off the phone. This is what I've
Okay.
had to teach myself. I mean, personally, it's a little bit less about the phone and more about checking. I'm on my laptop all day because I'm writing, and then, I'm checking the New York Times website, but it's always the same stories that I saw this morning, but I'm doing it anyway. So I had to teach myself, like, don't do it. It's a matter of discipline. Don't do it. Like I said about drinkers in AA, you have to refuse the drink and you have to refuse the drink every time and you do it one at a time. And every time you do it, you're a little bit stronger. So it's easier said than done. I know that. But I mean, we all know, listen, we all know this. We all know that what we have to do is resist the temptation to dive into the phone for the little dopamine hit or we're bored or whatever it is. But this is what we need to do. And I think, listen, if we're talking about a family context, obviously people can support each other. No phones at dinner, no phones after X o'clock. Parents have to put their phones away. They have to be a good example for their kids. Then maybe it's also about finding things to do so that you know, you don't have to be on your phone. Maybe it's, I don't know, family game night, or you all read together, or whatever it is, you know, putting something positive in place of that thing.
Let me ask you a question about both your books here, Bill. And I know you've written a lot. I think you have like 11 books or something like that.
No,
Don't you? Haven't read them all.
no,
No?
no, 5, but, you
Five.
know, I'm
Five.
working
Hey,
towards 11. Yeah.
so, what are some of the things you've heard from others about either book? And maybe something that maybe surprised you a little bit. Like, wow, I didn't know it was going to land that way. Because I know obviously, Excellent Sheep was a New York Times bestseller, got a lot of fanfare, and I know you've been asked to speak a lot on
Yeah,
Land of Solitude as well. Yeah,
yeah,
what? Tell me
yeah,
some things that you heard that
yeah.
either were
Okay.
pleasantly surprising to you, or
Yeah.
you know, yeah, give us some.
Well, so with Excellent Sheep, there is one big thing before and one big thing after. The big
Okay,
thing before was as a result of the essay 6 years earlier that the book grew out of, which is when I started to hear from many, 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 many students. And that's when I really learned for the first time about the mental health picture of it. Because even though I thought I knew my Yale students well, and I did know them
mhm,
well, the one thing that they did not admit to me and maybe not to themselves was how miserable the whole situation was making them. And that actually was a huge motive for me to really go forward and write the book, because I discovered that like there have been a couple of really good books about this at the high school level, like Madeline Levine's The Price of Privilege and
sure,
Denise Clark Pope's Doing School. People
yeah.
hadn't talked about it too much at the college level, but I realized that,
Mhm.
you know, and the big realization after the book came out. So I wrote a book about elite college education in America. And this time I heard from people all over the world at non elite colleges, not just students. And I realized that it wasn't just elite colleges, it wasn't just colleges, it was also K through 12. And it wasn't just America. I heard, you know, the system, partly because people all over the world are trying to get into American colleges or maybe elite British colleges, right? So the same kinds of things in China, in Brazil, in Singapore,
Sure.
et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So that was the big thing.
And on the
Yeah,
misery,
yeah, yeah.
was the misery coming from people who were still in the pursuit, or were they people that had achieved it? They've gotten out, they've gotten the job, and I'm empty. Was it more, I'm in my mid-20s, I'm doing it and it's not fulfilling? Was it more there, or was it the
It was
person
some of
trying
that. I
to
mean, I would say I heard from a lot of students and from a lot of recent graduates, right?
yeah,
People in
yeah.
their early 20s. I
Mhm.
also, probably more after the book came out, I did start to hear more from people later in life. Those people were the ones who would say, I did this for 20 years and then I got out and now I'm doing this, right?
Mhm.
So they weren't still in it so much. I think it's hard to, but they had managed to get out themselves and were telling me about this. Yeah.
And I'm gonna switch to Anasolic in a
Yeah,
second, but
sure.
was there any criticism from someone that you felt, well, it's probably valid? Was there, because you're gonna hear.
Listen, listen. So this probably won't come off well. I'm not sure I heard a lot of criticism that I thought was valid. And after all, I'd spent a lot of time thinking about this, right? There was the
Sure.
essay that and okay,
Yeah.
there was tremendous resistance and pushback from people, especially at Harvard, but
Sure.
also at other Ivy League schools who really, not students, but professors. Steven Pinker was one of them, who really did not want to hear this about their institutions.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I did a
because you were
lot of
going at the core, like, because like you don't pull punches, like you call it like it is. I read your book, and then I also listened to it as an audiobook, both ways. And I think part of your core message is these schools are not training people to be critical thinkers and to think for themselves. And I think that, like, that's something that they pride themselves on.
That's exactly right. And that's what they didn't want to hear. And I also and I s that's right. Your students are not real intellectuals. There isn't real intellectual depth except for the few exceptions. They really don't want to hear that. And I think I was also implicitly saying something that, you know, maybe again presumptuous, but I think I knew their students better than they did, even though I
Yeah,
hadn't met their particular students.
sure.
And it's
You're in the
true
front
of,
line.
you know, what's that?
You're in the front lines. I mean,
They were
there's such a thing as the ivory tower. You can be removed.
Well, here's the thing, right? I mean, like I said, when we talked about Excellent Sheep, most professors do not sit with their students and have an open-ended conversations because they want to be back in the lab. They want to be back in the library. So I was teaching at Yale. I was teaching in the ivory tower, but the point is I was listening to my students in a way that I know most professors don't, especially very eminent people like Steven Pinker. You don't get to be somebody like Steven Pinker unless you are spending every available minute working on your research, working on your publications. And as a result, you're not in touch with your students. You don't really know what's going on with them. You like to think you do. You pride yourself on being a teacher, but you're not. You're not in that sense. You're not a real mentor. You're not a real ear for your students. And I think that's really what infuriated them the most.
No, well said. Let's talk about the end of solitude. What was the reception that you got from that? Was
Right.
there any feedback that you
Right. Right.
surprised you, or landed a little differently in certain places than you thought it would? Then what can you share?
Well, I mean, probably the most interesting thing to say was that I had a friend, she had been a graduate student at Yale, who had gotten a job in the English department at West Point. And she and a couple of her colleagues saw the End of Solitude essay when it came out in 2009, and they invited me that fall to speak to the first year class, the plebes at West Point, about solitude. And I thought, I don't know these kids. They're not the kinds of kids that I'm familiar with, Ivy League, the kind of kid that I was. How am I going to get through to them? How am I going to make them care about solitude? Well, let me start with what they do care about. Well, what do they care about? I went on the website and I saw that the official slogan at West Point is duty, honor, country. I may be getting them out of order. But the word that I saw the most was leadership. And I realized that I'd heard that a lot in Yale too. They love to talk about leadership. So I started to think about what leadership means. And can I connect this in some way to the concept of solitude so that I could talk to them about solitude and leadership? And I realized that in a way that I thought was genuine, there is an argument to be made, which is to be a real leader and not just somebody who climbs to the top of the greasy pole, which is what they mean by leadership at places like Yale. You need to be able to break from the herd, right? And think for yourself. The example I used was David Petraeus, who had become famous because he had bucked the brass and developed a counterinsurgency strategy in Iraq and talked about things that the higher ups didn't want to hear. And in order to do that, to think for yourself, you needed to be able, we've been saying this, you needed to be able to be alone. You needed to be able to find solitude. So I went there. It was Halloween in 2009. I remember the date because they had a dress up party afterwards. And I gave this talk called Solitude and Leadership at West Point, which was a fascinating place to visit. And it got published. And to this day, it's become this big text in the business world.
Wow.
I literally just earlier this year was in Toronto and Montreal talking to business people about the importance of solitude, a world that's really not familiar to me. That I was a real fish out of water, but they are also looking for ways of breaking from the herd, right? Ways of thinking new ways of thinking that's going to enable them to be more effective at what they do. So that's been a very unexpected result of this. But I think it speaks to the power and importance of solitude and what it can give you.
No, this is awesome. We're about to wind down and do what we call our lightning round. A couple rapid fire, quick non questions off topic
Okay.
with you here, Bill. But is there anything we haven't discussed about the end of solitude that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I think
Friends, I'll tell you, I've only been doing this 9 years now. I've only had two people. Bill's one, Rick Bischoff is the other, who's VP of Enrollment now, Chapman at Case for a lot of years, who have said, I don't want any questions in advance. Just let's get on and talk. I want it to be natural. So, yeah, so this is just, Bill had no idea what I was going to ask him. He said, I want it to be authentic. I don't want any outline or anything. So, our listeners should know that. All right. So, I know you like to garden. How else do you chill and unwind and relax?
well, I like to hang out with my wife
There you
and we sit
go.
around and talk. We gossip about our friends. And this time of year in Portland, Oregon, we go for long hikes. Yeah.
My youngest daughter's in Portland, Oregon right now. The
Oh, good.
Japanese gardens. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
professional development. She works at the UNC Chapel Hill there. And so they sent her there for some professional development. So yeah, just
Oh,
sent us
great.
pictures this morning. The Japanese gardens are gorgeous there.
They're amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. What's on the bucket list? Something you hope to place either to go or something to do,
It's funny.
before you move on.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm 62 and I mean, there's still lots of places I would love to travel or I would love to go back to, but I've decided I sort of went through kind of a period of questioning kind of in my mid-50s. And I decided I want to just keep doing what I've been doing. I love writing. I love thinking about things. I love talking to students and talking to people about what I'm thinking about. I have a friend, a wonderful writer named Megan Dam, who has an essay that says, where she says, people say try new things. Don't try new things. Just keep doing the things that you like to do and that you're good at. I'm
There
like,
you go.
okay, that's good for me.
There you go. What do you wish your 18-year-old self knew?
Oh my God. Well, Excellent Sheep is written to my 18-year-old self.
Don't be a sheep. Don't be a sheep.
Things are going to, you know what? Don't be so worried about whether things are going to work out. I
Yeah.
feel like in retrospect, and I would say this about my personal life too, in retrospect, like I didn't have to spend so much time worrying because things can work out. I think if you, I know this sounds like such a cliche, but I think if you are true to yourself and you listen to that inner voice, that inner compass, it's going to steer you in the right direction.
I asked that question to somebody recently and they had an answer that was somewhat similar to yours. It was don't sweat the small stuff. Just don't sweat the small stuff.
I'm not even sure you should sweat the big stuff.
There you go.
Not
I
because
like
the
that.
big stuff not because the big stuff isn't important, but I'm not
But
sure that
because
all
it'll
the
just work out. Because it'll work out. Yeah.
it's not gonna work out by itself, but I also don't think that sweating that the worry is
Yeah.
actually productive. I think that worry is a form of magical thinking. In other words, you think that if you worry about something, somehow it's gonna make a difference to the outcome, but I don't actually think that's true.
So, Bill, what is a book other than one you've written that you really think parents should read? Like most parents, you're going to benefit if you will take
Yeah,
10
yeah,
hours,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
and read this
yeah,
book.
yeah. Have you talked to Julie Lithcott-Haynes, who write How to
My
Raise an Adult?
Yeah, I want to have Julie Licott Hames on the podcast. I've got someone who knows her reaching out to her to try to
Yeah,
make
I
that
think
happen.
How to Raise an Adult is a great book.
Yeah.
I did an event with her when Excellent Sheep came out. She was still freshman dean at Stanford, and
Yeah.
she really has smart things to say.
No, I agree. I've actually gone back and watched her TED Talk a few times because I find it pretty inspiring. Yeah, as well as having read the book. So, what do you have in the works with writing? What's percolating your mind? What are you working on now? Another book coming out? Articles?
I am writing a book about being Jewish.
Nice.
I
What?
I grew up in a religious community.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a progressive Zionist youth movement in high school and college, which was a really formative experience for me.
Uh-huh.
And I'm writing about those experiences, but I'm trying to put them in a larger historical context of, what does it mean to be Jewish in the modern world, where all of a sudden Jews had opportunities to enter the larger society, but that also created a crisis of like, well, what does it mean to be Jewish now? So that's what I'm working. It's very personal.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you this question, and this gets a little political, but I can't help but ask
Yeah,
it.
sure.
I work with a sizable number of Jewish families, and I will frequently hear Columbia, it's out. Harvard, it's out. You
Yeah.
know, and Penn sometimes. Obviously, there's been a lot of anti-Semitism, on college campuses. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's fair, or do you think that's throwing the baby
It's
out with the
really tough.
bathwater?
It's really tough. And I went to Columbia. My dad taught there. I mean, I spent, a quarter century from a very early age. And I'm not on the ground at those places. I can understand parents feeling that way. My sense is that maybe things are not quite where they were, quite as hostile as I think they clearly were. And I want to say, I mean, I'm supportive of people protesting for the Palestinians, right? And insofar as they've been, that people have been their voices have been shut down. I think that's been terrible. But at the same time, there's a difference between protesting and creating a hostile environment for others, for Jewish students. And I think it's pretty clear that a hostile environment was created at a lot of those campuses. My sense is that things are better than they were, that the schools are more conscientious about it. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a legitimate concern, but I also don't think you should be categorical about it. Like, absolutely not this place, absolutely not that place. So, I mean, I don't, I sort of, I'm not giving you like a really clear answer.
No, but it's very nuanced and it's complex, right? Like sometimes some of the places that have had some of the incidents that get a lot of publicity, and I'm not necessarily talking about those schools, I'm talking about other places too, like
Yeah,
Michigan and other places.
yeah.
Some those are some of the places that have some of the critical mass and the more sizable numbers.
Jewish
So that
students.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, I know,
which
I
can
know.
partly make you a target, potentially, but it could also be there's support there as well because
Yes,
at least you're
yes,
not going at it alone.
yes, and I
And
think Jewish
so
students have gotten
West
more organized.
Northwestern, like these are places with sizable Jewish communities. They've had incidents. It's a very hard conversation. Ultimately, it's up to each family and whether they feel comfortable based on their own research that they've done. But and I always want to respect each person's individual experience. I'm very big on if you haven't walked in someone else's shoes.
Yes, yes,
Of course, I'm black, and I've had that gives me a certain lens, to identify with
yeah,
certain things. But yeah, it's some of these schools have really hurt themselves in the Jewish community, and there's been a diminished interest in some of them, and I'm talking about some of the bigger brand names that at one time would have been a, early decision, first choice option. They've
hey,
they've they've blown it, and they've just really they need to really repair things, and I know it's very complicated. I know it's very
yes,
complicated. Yeah,
yes. I
yeah,
mean, Columbia was the Jewish Ivy,
yeah.
and it's in the city that was sort of the Jewish, it's really sad. I think it's a real issue. It may not be the thing that, should be determinative. I would like to say Jews should not retreat in the face of this hostility. We should assert our right to be in these spaces. But I also know, like, you don't want your kid to be exposed to that. You don't want your kid to be at the vanguard of it's like you want them to be able to be comfortable in college. Yeah,
Yeah, I was talking to former client of mine at Michigan, and you know, they've had to hire their wells had to hire security,
it's
pay for
terrible.
security. Kids are
It's
paying
really
for,
terrible.
and listen, there's other groups that are experience persecution and hostility as well. And so, I'm just asking you this because you're Jewish, and so I wanted to get
Yeah,
a perspective,
yeah. Thank you.
from your lips. And if you were Palestinian, I'd probably ask you the same thing, and you'd probably
Sure.
have some feelings there. So yeah, awesome. Well, this has been fantastic, Bill. Friends, if you're new here and you like this podcast, we'd ask that you'd subscribe, like, comment, share, click the bell notification because YouTube's algorithm helps identify other people with your interests. And our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. And we like to talk to thought leaders from different perspectives. And Bill, I just really appreciate you being so generous, giving me more than an hour and a half of your time. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Likewise. It was great to talk to you.
My pleasure.